Namaste and a very happy Earth Day. Not just today, but every day to all joining us from different parts of the world. We welcome you to day 3 of Guiding Nature, a unique 4-day series hosted by Chinmaya Mission Cleveland and Niagara in collaboration with United Consciousness, where we learn the philosophy from our scriptures from Sri Vivek Ji Gupta, the spiritual guide of Chinmaya Mission Cleveland and Niagara, and also hear from an environmental expert. Sri Vivek Ji Gupta, or as we lovingly call him, Vivek Ji, touches lives of seekers across the globe by expounding on the purpose of life in an accessible manner for varied demographics. The natural progression of these teachings is serving society and humanity. With his philanthropic vision, Vivek Ji has inspired and invoked our community's generosity to support a variety of causes such as empowerment of Indigenous women and children, animal protection, suicide prevention efforts amongst the LGBTQ+ youth, global relief efforts, including in India, Turkey, and Ukraine, to name a few. Under Vivek Ji's leadership, the Prithvi Seva Sangha initiative is focused on increasing environmental education, living more sustainable lives, and supporting multiple environmental charities that serve air, water, plants, and animals. Without further ado, over to Vivek Ji. Hari Om, Vivek Ji.
Hari Om, and greetings from Cleveland, and a joyous Earth Day to all. There cannot be a better way to honor our Earth than to be in this workshop that we're facilitating together right now. Each evening, you have seen me speak from a different home. There's a formal background, an informal background, an indoor background, an outdoor background. When I travel, especially in the mornings, and I'm very tuned into my reading and my writing, and then if I have to get up to do something, sometimes I will see something move and be very startled by it. But then when I look at what is moved, it's just my reflection, which I know to be scary, right? But when I do know that this is me, whether it's a mirror or a window or a shiny surface, all of that panic immediately turns into, I should know better, and humor that I felt that. And what this shows is the power of oneness. As soon as I didn't know that was me, panic. As soon as I did know this was me, there was rest. The G20 is being hosted by India or Bharat. And the theme that they're trying to share with these 20 countries, with the whole world, is Vasudhaiva Kutumbaka. And what this means in a practical sense is one earth, one family, one future. Now, how does a government proliferate such a message? They have chosen international coordinators, 2 of which are United Consciousness and Chinmaya Mission. I again express my honor to be part of both organizations and that we have been selected by the government of India to engage in this noble work. I welcome all those who are joining us live from Cleveland, America, Canada, Europe, India. Our workshop is about knowing that we are the source of joy. And so the more you know about this, the more you smile. So this is my cue for everyone to smile more and stare less. And for everyone who doesn't have their cameras on, to turn their cameras on so we can see your smile too. Otherwise, I'll be afraid. I'll be afraid of the separation. We are engaged in a collaborative effort. There is much more collaboration that's going to happen this year, and I'm briefing you on this. On June 19th, we are going to celebrate International Day of Yoga. This will tune into one future. We want every day to be better. We want every year to be better. We want our future to be better. On July 16th, we are going to celebrate Prithvi Utsava. And this will focus on One Earth. We have many great thinkers and hopefully singers that will join us for this collaboration. On August 15th, we are going to organize a grand interfaith forum where people with the noble sentiment will share what is the message of their faith, of their religion. That will focus on one family. So there's much more collaboration. The workshop we're in right now really tends to all of this. It's like the entry point so that we can get to these specific rooms. This workshop is on how nature is guiding us to oneness. When we think of nature, I feel we do think of oneness. We don't feel that the dandelion is so separate from the grass. The branch is so separate from the bud. We feel this oneness, how nature is guiding us to this. And it's not enough just to approach this in a general way. We are focusing on specifics, that is insights on how to be more loving. We love ourselves the most because we feel this oneness. How do I feel the same with thyself, with thy neighbor, with thy mother? And these insights are not just from philosophy. I am happy that it's beginning with philosophy because this is a sublime subject, but also professional insights. We have listened to two great scientists. We have two more great scientists to listen to learn from. All that is created comes with a manual. I have a pretty irritable throat. And it's funny that I have this because my job is to speak. This is my vocation in life. So I was just taking a fisherman's friend. Now you can screenshot this and we can send it to them and I can get free fisherman friends. But anyways, like there's instructions in the back. Don't do this or do this. Now, if we think of creation, what is the manual on creation? How are we supposed to live? One of those manuals is Bhagavata. Bhagavata is a manual on how to nurture bhakti. An English word for that is love. Love thyself, love thy neighbor, love thy mother. And when one does love more and more and more, one feels the oneness they feel with themselves with all. This is why Bhagavata beautifully aligns with Vasudeva Kutumbaka. In the 11th section of Bhagavata, and I think many of you don't know this, but Bhagavata is 18,000 verses. You're getting to experience an awesome portion of this in 4 hours. For those who have studied this completely, we're at hour 152, not just 4 hours. Shri Krishna is trying to help Rishi Uddhava to practice love so that he can feel oneness, and he's struggling, just like we struggle. We all know we should practice love. We know we should feel oneness, but we struggle. So Shri Krishna shares precedent. He gives a narration about how a Avadhuta, also known as Rishi Dattatreya, also known as a Brahmana, how he has learned from nature to be more virtuous. We've come across many of these values. Now, a synonym for virtuousness is joyousness. Think of this experientially. The more faith you have, the more trust you have, the more discipline you have, you just feel happier. You feel more at ease with the people around you. Shri Krishna is trying to help him feel that he is the source of his own joy. How nature has guided this Brahmana we have explored thus far. Number one, Prithvi, or earth, and the value is to forgive. Number two, Vayu, or wind, and the value to be practiced is purify. Number three, Akasha, or space, and the value to practice here is to accept. Number four is Apa, or water, in English, to refresh. Number five, Kapota, and I think a lot of you like this word, yes? Kapota, or dove, and the value to be practiced here is serve, to serve. A specific practice within serve was me encouraging everyone to give a portion of their resources, time, and effort to our earth. Our earth has given us everything. The least we can do is to give a portion back. And that's why we have such a strong effort towards planting trees and funding the planting of trees. I've spoken about this. You've seen this on social media also. Next week, we're going to commence a new offering within this community called Birthday Satsanga. On your birthday, if you wanted to have a satsanga, then you have that opportunity. And now, this may deter you, but I'm going to say it anyways. As part of this satsanga, we will identify a charity and encourage those people who gather for your birthday not to give to you. Who here doesn't have way more, not than they need, than they want? So to give on behalf of you to charities that are helping the environment. So by show of hands, who wants to have a birthday satsanga now? Even if you don't, at least indulge me by putting your hand up. Number 6 is Ajagara, or python, and our practice was quieten. I had read somewhere, I think it was the Harvard Business Review, that when you buy a product from a store that doesn't have a return policy, you have greater satisfaction with that product. When you have an option of potentially returning that, when you buy it, what are you thinking? Why did I buy it? I should have got it in red. This is cheaper. See how we overthink that? But if you don't have an option, you have no choice but to enjoy that. So to live a life in a way where quietude is more important. Number 7, Sindhu, or sea, and our practice, deepen. I had shared a lot about being less body conscious. And a great way to do this is to look in mirrors less. I was just at a fundraiser and I was washing my hands and I was observing people at the sink, okay? At the sink. And as I was watching them wash their hands, they're all looking in the mirror. You don't have to look in the mirror to wash your hands. Look down, close your eyes, but we're so body conscious. This is a way to be deeper. We continue. I have to move fast. The eighth, this is all new content. The eighth guide is patanga. In English, this means a moth. What this Brahmana observes is, in the jungle, when a fire was lit, those moths, they were attracted to this glow, but they couldn't control themselves, they couldn't stop themselves. So what would those moths do? Go into that fire and get burned and die. Now, what can we learn from this? What we can learn is appreciate. Our eighth practice on how to be more loving, how to feel oneness, is to appreciate. See, that moth immersed itself in that fire when it could have appreciated that fire. It didn't have to immerse itself in that. In reference to loving thyself, what does this look like? Appreciate what you have. Appreciating what you have, you're less concerned about what you don't have then. You don't feel this burn of, I don't have this, I don't have this, I don't have this. How to practice this with thy neighbor? Appreciate who they are. Earlier, I told you to focus on people's strengths. Remember, I gave you that example of that lady who was asking me how I keep my clothes so white. See, it's much easier virtually. My clothes can be very dirty, but because of filters, it looks like they're clean. Looks like I'm clean, but because of filters. So now when I share, because I don't want to give you a monotonous message, appreciate who they are, appreciate what they have done for their communities, for their societies. Don't appreciate what they've done for you, because it's still about you then. Appreciate how they've dedicated themselves to this or that. And in reference to loving thy mother, be in nature more. You appreciating a video with cool music and a waterfall is great, but you actually being in nature is quite different, correct? Me saying Niagara Falls and you being near Niagara Falls is quite different. I love when I interact with children and they ask me, Vivekji, where were you born? And I share, in Niagara Falls. Right, that's the correct saying. Where were you born? In Cleveland. I don't say I was born at Cleveland. I was born in Niagara Falls. And so, you were born in the water. So when they say it, I just as seriously say yes. And then I don't explain and I carry on. So appreciate nature by being in nature. It's a great way to nurture resilience. We can all be more resilient. Number 9, the 9th guide, this Brahmana observes a madhukrit. Madhukrit in English means a honeybee. And what he sees, he's paying attention to nature, how nature is guiding him, is that this honeybee goes from flower to flower to flower, not hurting that flower, but just collecting some of that nectar, the pollen. I don't really know what it collects. It collects the essence. Essence, that's why I'm not the scientist speaking, correct? Collects the essence from that flower and makes honey. And now for us, our practice is to learn. Learn from every experience like that honeybee collects from every flower, for us to collect from every experience. How to practice this in terms of loving thyself, expanding our oneness? Journal. I encourage seekers like me, like all of you, at the end of the day, if you have a nice journal, I'll do some more product placement, like this beautiful Moleskine journal with these high quality pages. I should be getting a lot of free stuff. On this right side of this journal, write down what this day meant to you. What were some hardships? What were some struggles? What were some revelations? What were some wins? When you journal, you're learning from your day. Naturally, the next day is going to be more fulfilling then. In reference to others, how do we learn? When interacting with people, instead of instinctually talking about yourself, ask them about them. So many times when I go places, I say Hari Om to people. It is a message about let us be less ignorant towards joy. And people respond, people react with, good, how are you? I never asked you how you are. I said Hari Om. But we're so reactive, correct? So ask them, and this is a secret, but now I'm telling you, so it's not a secret. In our culture, when you eat, what are you supposed to do? Eat. And so when I eat, then people ask a lot of questions about this or that. So my strategy is when I sit down and eat, I ask them a really deep philosophical question they don't have an answer to. So I say, please share. And then I get to eat my meal. So ask about them in reference to loving our mother. It is to organize these kinds of workshops on the environment, on the earth. What we're doing together is such a magnificent investment, isn't it? If Cleveland gets an awesome swimming pool, who benefits by that? Obviously the people in Cleveland, but not the people in Akron. If the earth is invested in, who benefits by that? Every being, every generation. There can't be a greater investment. So organize such learning. Number 10, Gaja. Anyone in English? What does Gaja mean? An elephant. That's correct. Elephants, and I'm only taking this based on philosophy, elephants are lusty animals. And so what hunters do in the jungle is they take the scent of elephants and they rub them on bulky things that look like an elephant. Let's say it's a rock, or they create like a wooden carve out. And then what happens is that the elephants, they're lusty towards these other elephants, and then they get trapped into a pit or whatever it may be. So what can we learn from this? Here's what we shouldn't learn from this: how to trap elephants. Okay, that's what we should not learn. What we can learn in terms of our lives is to move. To move. See, that elephant gets infatuated by that image of that other elephant. But suppose that elephant just kept on moving towards its food or water or whatever it would be, it wouldn't get trapped then, correct? For us, how we can practice this when we are feeling lusty, and some may not identify with this, when we are overthinking. If I see someone beautiful and I keep thinking about them, it becomes lust then, correct? It's an expression of overthinking. When we are overthinking, what we can do is clean. Go clean something, right? We always need to clean dishes, laundry, driveway, leaves, whatever it may be. That helps us to get out of our head, but in a productive way. Clean. Like when I just need some time for myself, what I like to do is make, like, after our children leave in the morning, I go and make their beds, I fold their clothes, I tidy up, because my mornings are with a lot of reading, writing, reflecting. So it helps me to just do something rather than just stay in my own head. In regards to others, when we interact with people, people are going to push back against us. They're going to pull on us. They're going to compliment us, criticize us. But if you want to maintain that relationship, you have to keep moving then, correct? You said this to me yesterday, but I want us to have a relationship, so I have to keep moving. And that's why I've shared with many of you in Meaningful Mornings, more important than a person is a purpose. If I can commune with the purpose, then I will keep moving then. But if it's just tuned into a person, I will get stuck. One more in reference to loving thy mother. As you're moving, and we all move a lot, we walk, we drive, etc., pick up litter. Number one is don't litter. But while you're moving, I see so many joggers and walkers that jog and walk with a plastic bag, and they pick up litter while they're doing this. What a great usage of moving. I'm going to move a little bit faster, okay? I still have to cover 2 teachers, which I'm going to do. Number 11, I'm going to speak really fast like this, so listen carefully. Do you remember those Micro Machine commercials where that person would speak really fast? Number 11 is harina. Harina in English means deer, a deer, like in the jungle. And deer, they get very infatuated by sound. They almost get hypnotized by this, and that's how they're trapped. That's what a hunter does. So number 1, don't learn how to trap deer, but more practically, it is to inquire. What we can learn from a deer is to inquire. In terms of ourselves, it is to have a meeting with yourself. We give such importance to meeting others. I have to meet the person to clean my pool. I have to meet with my accountant. I have to meet with my significant other's parents, whoever it is. But what about yourself? Give time for yourself to get to know yourself, and don't change it. If someone emails you, if someone calls you, if you're in an important meeting, you don't answer that, correct? And I am going to take this to a deeper level because I love this thought. In the Bhagavad Gita, a value that Sri Krishna describes to be very important is daksha. Daksha typically is defined as efficiency, but more philosophically, it is to do what only you can do. To do what only you can do. Now, we as humans, we have an intellect that is more developed than any stone, plant, or animal. As much as you think some of your family members, that doesn't apply to them, it does, okay? I'm telling you that humans have developed enough intellect to inquire, am I happy? What is the purpose of my life? What will happen when I die? So inquire. In reference to others, pray for them. Praying is a way of understanding another person and what they need. A really lovely movie and person is Fred Rogers. And the show is called A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, I think. And what's special about Fred Rogers is he used to pray for people by name. He would say, such and such name, I pray for you. Such and such name, I pray for you. So a way to inquire in reference to others is pray for them. Pray for them by name. Like we do in Meaningful Mornings, correct? This person's not well, or this person's relative is in the hospital. And in reference to loving thy mother, intensify your environmentalism. I was just sharing with the group of seekers in Portland, when we were growing up, there were 3 R's: reduce, reuse, recycle. But I congratulated all those in Portland, and many are joining right now, that they've introduced a pre-R. It's like R0, which is to refuse. Refuse, do that, then you don't even have to reduce, reuse, recycle, correct? So you have to intensify your environmentalism. In Sanskrit, we would describe this as yoga. The 12th, and I'm not going to cover it, I'm just going to speak it out. It is Meena, like Meenakshi. In English, this means fish. And what we can practice from a fish is exercise. Now, for 24 hours, you have to guess, what in the world am I talking about? How can we learn to exercise from a fish when they don't even breathe like we do? Completing my portion before we hear from our scientist. In Bhagavata, later on in the portion we're studying, Shri Krishna shares with Rishi Uddhava that you can practice puja. Puja means you can worship in 11 different centers. Here's what they are. I'll read them in English. The sun, the fire, the teacher, the cow, the disciple, the space, the wind, the water, the earth. Naturally, I'm building up to that. But further on, the spirit, as in your own spirit. And Shri Krishna concludes with Sarva Bhuta, which means all beings. What is awesome about that is we can practice love. We can feel oneness, not just in a certain room, not just in a certain building, but with all of these 11 centers. And our earth gives us a beautiful field for that. So does our family, so does the future. From philosophy to professionalism, we are now going to listen to insights on air quality and our role from Prakash Bhave. He's a seeker, he's a friend, and here are some insights about him before he shares some insights. Prakash is a seeker who has served at Chinmaya Mission Raleigh, Durham, North Carolina for several years. The first time I ever came to the Raleigh Center, I had stayed with him and his family. He is a lecturer at NC State University and an air quality scientist at Duke University, as well as an environmental lobbyist. His concern for climate change has taken him across the globe, from working for the Environmental Protection Agency in the US to working as a senior air quality scientist in Kathmandu, Nepal. During their time in Nepal and then in India, Prakash, his wife, she's joining us right now, I've known her even longer than Prakash, and children learned how to reduce their carbon footprint. The Bhave family continues their efforts to protect our planet through their minimalist lifestyle. Prakash, welcome, and thank you for sharing in advance.
Hari Om, everybody. Hari Om to those in live audience in Cleveland and everybody around the world. I'm going to talk more like the Micro Machines person to keep us on track here. Let's see. Okay. Darn it. I'm afraid of that. Is my full screen showing or my notes window? notes? Bummer. Okay. One more try. And we actually had tested this, but why is it switching on me? Okay, share more. Full screen? Yay, okay. So my honor to be one of your Prithvi Mitras this evening for the third section of the workshop on Vasudeva Kutumbaka. Happy Earth Day to everybody around the world. Hopefully you did something for the Mother Earth today. I'm sure you have been, because we've been learning from so many messengers from nature for the Bhagavatam. Today, my assignment was to tell everybody, as a scientist, a little bit about air pollution and air quality. Much of this will be review and well known to you. You all know, of course, when we breathe air pollution, it causes us to cough, maybe worsens our asthma. What many don't know is that the main way that air pollution affects our health in terms of our premature mortality is by affecting our cardiovascular system, causing heart attacks and strokes. Of course, air pollution is the cause of of what you heard about on day one of the workshop. That is climate change. It's the reason. It's the carbon emissions that come out when we burn anything that contains carbon, whether that be biomass or fossil fuels, that causes the sea levels to rise and causes all the extreme weather that we've been experiencing. In addition, air pollution, this is another lesser known thing, that air pollution actually damages crops. A couple of days ago here in North Carolina, we had an ozone orange alert day, which means that the air pollution level was high enough, at least ozone pollution was high enough, that it was unsafe to do a rigorous exercise. But in addition, when ozone is high, it attacks the cellulose in plants. The double carbon-carbon bond breaks it down, and then that reduces the yield of crops. And this causes a food shortage in many places around the world. In the Indo-Gangetic Plain, they lose about 10% of their projected crop yield every year because of ozone pollution. In the Himalayas, where we were living close to when we lived in Nepal, air pollution, that is black carbon soot, deposits on the glaciers and snow surfaces, causing them to melt even faster than they would with regular atmospheric climate change. And then this results in a reduction in the amount of water available to mountain villages, as well as over time, as the glaciers melt too much, there'll be a shortage of hydropower, which is the main source of energy in Nepal and Bhutan and parts of northern India. One thing that's very confusing about air pollution when we read the news about, oh, it's a very high pollution day, or this Delhi is ranked 10th in the world or 20th in the world, and Beijing is some other number, is that there are so many air pollutants. There's an alphabet soup of them. I wanted to break those down in two categories. There's gaseous air pollutants and particulate pollutants. This is an aerial photo of the Kathmandu Valley where we could see a very distorted, blurred image. And that's because the particles in the atmosphere are scattering the light. They scatter light very efficiently because they're about the same size as the wavelength of light. And so the gaseous pollutants, on the other hand, are almost all invisible. They're not what causes us to see the air being smoggy or polluted. Within the gases, there's another alphabet soup. There's greenhouse gases, the ones that you learned about on Thursday. These are the ones that cause climate change. Everyone knows about carbon dioxide, but also methane gas is another very potent warming agent, as well as nitrous oxide, which comes from fertilizing fields, or in the case of the US, over-fertilizing fields with nitrogen. A lot of people have heard about chlorofluorocarbons, which were discovered in the late 1970s and early 80s to be the cause for the depleting ozone hole. But they are also being found to be very, very efficient at warming the atmosphere. Closer to the surface of the Earth, where we all live and breathe, There's an even larger soup of different air pollutants that come from power plants like sulfur dioxide, from animal husbandry, livestock, poultry and swine, pig production that emits ammonia when the feces of the animals is concentrated. Carbon monoxide, which comes from any form of incomplete combustion. Benzene coming from cigarette smoking, as well as vehicle emissions, evaporative emissions from gasoline that causes cancer. Nitrogen oxides that come primarily in the US from power plants, as well as from diesel trucks and buses, and so on. Ozone, we already talked about. That actually does not get emitted by anybody. It gets formed in the atmosphere through chemical reactions and then goes on to damage our lungs and crops and so forth. The other side of the pollution that many of you may have heard of are not gases at all. These are fine particulate matter, which we abbreviate as PM 2.5. They're so small that you could stack 20 of them and they would still be smaller than the width of a human hair. These are known nowadays as the killer pollutant. They're the cause of 7 million premature deaths per year around the world. And as I mentioned before, these are the pollutants that cause it to be very difficult to see through the haze, see the mountains from Kathmandu, or see across the street in New Delhi. They're the cause of what makes the blue sky appear white or even gray in the middle of the day. They affect climate change as well in more nonlinear ways than carbon dioxide, affecting the monsoon pattern in South Asia because they make for smaller cloud droplets. And then the clouds take a lot longer to become, the droplets become large enough so that they can cause rain events. And then they have cloud bursts or massive rainfalls somewhere where it shouldn't have happened. And then I also already mentioned how they accelerate snow and ice melting. Since you were promised to hear from a scientist, I have to add some technical things here. PM 2.5, this fine particulate matter, has very weird units. The units are micrograms, that is millionths of a gram per cubic meter of air. So they're very, very light. An individual particle is weighs in the picogram. So what is that? 1 trillionths of a gram. So very, very, very small. So small that you cannot see them, most of them with the naked eye. So micrograms per cubic meter are the units that I'm going to show some data about PM 2.5 from. So how does it look across the United States? We have many, many locations measuring PM 2.5 continuously in the US. We have, Canada also has a fair amount, about 100 to 200 of these. Here is where I live in North Carolina, where our PM 2.5 levels are less than 7 micrograms per cubic meter when averaged over the course of a year. The most polluted place in the US is shown here on the left, 22, so 3 times more polluted than where I live. The next few are in the Midwest. Cleveland folks, you are now on the podium. You're top 3 to 5 in the country. And in Los Angeles, everybody's heard about as being sort of a notorious PM 2.5 and pollution hotspot. There's some numbers down there for you. 13 micrograms per cubic meter is what you're breathing on average in Cleveland. What's considered healthy? The World Health Organization used to say 10 micrograms per cubic meter or less is considered healthy air. A year or two ago, they refined this and said, actually, if 5 micrograms or less is healthy. We're seeing health effects, adverse health effects, even at the 6, 7, 8 microgram level. But for the most part, I consider our air in Raleigh to be quite clean, and that's perhaps because of this perspective. Putting that US map in the context of the entire world, I want to note that this is a logarithmic scale. So this is going up from 1 microgram to 10 and then 100. And what we can see is that our PM levels in all US, Canada, and so forth are less than 20 micrograms per cubic meter. But in these other regions, it's more than 40 micrograms per cubic meter. So more than 6 times the pollution level of Raleigh-Durham, or more than 3 times the levels in Cleveland. Delhi has been on the map in air pollution, 140 micrograms per cubic meter, so 20 times what we're breathing here in Raleigh. Vivek Ji in the introduction said that he stayed with us 10 years ago. It's almost been 10 years exactly, Vivek Ji. It was end of March of 2013 when he spent the whole week in Raleigh for the first time. I think it was his first trip. And we did all kinds of fun things, including spending time in nature. At that time, I think he was still talking while eating, but here he is getting some food at Interbiksha. He played chess with my kids, watched movies with them. We played tug of war in the park. This is more of a trip down memory lane for Vivek Ji than for the rest of you who are on the call today. Listen to us sing bhajans, led us in a meditation session where we practiced what the Harina and the Gaja and are doing, and then played some other games. He even attended our Bal Vihar on Sunday morning before flying back to Niagara, and ate ice cream with us. It was a lot of fun. During this visit, me and Nita, we got to observe a superb example of someone who was living a lifestyle outside of the norm, and it motivated us to transcend the boundaries of our Grahastha life and try to do more good for the world and expose our children to other places that will allow us all to become more worldly, try to live happily with less, reduce our materialistic consumption, lower our carbon footprint. And that's what led us to moving to Nepal. Briefly, we thought about different places to live, and this Venn diagram kind of helped guide us. So here we are. Where are we? In the US, where we have tons of expertise about air pollution. So we're outside of this circle of Venn diagram. We don't have poor air quality anymore, so we're outside of this circle. And we've had the political will and political stability to clean the air for the last 30 years or so, and the data show that we made market progress. Move over to China, which is one place I at the time had heard so much about their pollution, but realized that while they have poor air quality and strong political will to clean up, there was no longer a shortage of technical experts. And eventually, I wanted to go to a place that would be in the center of the Venn diagram. Couldn't get a job in Thailand or Philippines, probably due to lack of contacts or lack of knowledge of that region. Wound up in Nepal, which was an experience of a lifetime, spending 3 years there doing the most exciting work ever of my career. We learned to live happily with much less creature comforts. We had a much healthier diet, no processed foods, almost a zero carbon footprint except for our air travel, which I've talked about in previous sessions. But the downside, of course, is that we breathed a lot of air pollution. But the upshot of that was that the work that I was doing there had a bigger potential impact on the air. And then 5-6 years ago, we moved back to the US and started to take some tactile actions that we could apply to our daily lives to reduce the air pollution or reduce our own emissions. In Raleigh, we started by living in a much smaller home, much like Vivek Ji's upbringing. Our 3 kids sleep in the same room, and kids walk, and we're walking, bicycling to work, to school, we bus to work, had hybrid vehicles. Actually, we bought a second hybrid vehicle that got totaled, but then we ended up replacing it with another hybrid vehicle, so we're doing good there. Bottom line is our household emissions are about as low as they could be. And in terms of tactile actions, I don't need to lecture to you all. You all know maybe what are the sources of air pollution that your families and you as an individual might be contributing to. And you could think about incremental ways to reduce those. The biggest one that most people don't think about, or the biggest 2, I mentioned at a previous talk about 18 months ago, are to reduce your consumption. Because while buying clothes directly doesn't emit air pollutants, upstream of the clothes that you're buying in the department store or at the designer fashion store, there's a lot of emissions in the production of the clothes, as well as in the harnessing of the natural resources required to manufacture those clothes. And that out of sight, out of mind kind of thinking is sort of what's gotten us into the mess that we're in, because we're so out of touch with what harm is being caused to the earth and to the environment from our consumption patterns. And then the second one that I've become more privy or aware of, at least recently, is reducing air travel and trying to swap out air travel with more road trips, more local holidays and such. Let's see, I think this is time. This slide was not to plug my previous talk, but rather to remind myself that I want to show a little clip of a video. Vivekji gave some really, so part of this, I think I've been fortunate enough to be invited as a speaker 3-4 times in various different types of sessions and workshops. And so part of this today's presentation is my chance to have an interaction with Vivekji, with all of you as an audience, as a side audience. And so I wanted to share with him that that I took to heart some of the advice that he provided at the end of my first talk. Let's see, let's listen to Vivekji and hear what tactile action he offered to the crowd that day. Oh.
And as I've shared with all of those who can change their careers, become a politician. This has to happen at a policy level. And I mean that most seriously. You're all smiling. Like I teach you Vedanta, you smile and nod and think it applies to someone else. I know you're doing the same in terms of me encouraging you to become politicians, but that's what we need, correct? We don't need more lawyers. We don't need more preachers. We need more politicians to enact such policy that is focusing on the substrata.
And so, Vivekji, what I wanted to share with the group last time, I made a big pitch about how, in addition to these tactile actions, reducing consumption, reducing air travel, reducing our vehicle emissions, using more efficient ways of heating and cooling our homes, while these do make a dent in the amount of pollution that we emit to the environment, the solutions have to be at a much grander scale. Things like what you're doing here by educating many and then putting thousands of people at scale into action. At the policy level, I spent years lobbying Congress for putting a price on carbon. I shared about that at an earlier presentation, and eventually grew frustrated with the process because our political actors that are available to us in these two parties, they have more of an incentive to fight with one another and not accomplish anything than to compromise and put forward a solution that'll have even incremental benefit to the society. And so today you'll see in my t-shirt, I'm wearing the t-shirt of a new political party that I've joined, and then I'm spending a ton of time trying to get onto ballots in North Carolina, as well as others. My counterparts are doing that in other parts of the country. It's called the Forward Party. And it's a truly selfless seva type of party where we're not trying to get elected the next president or anything like that, but we're trying to dismantle this two-party system that's polarizing us and that's causing us to have no ability to pass environmental reform. The biggest environmental reform that we had in the last 15 years was the Inflation Reduction Act last October, November. And that was passed because of the slimmest of majorities of one political party and shoved down the throats of the others. And it's very likely that it'll get overturned by the next Congress because of our two-party system. We're basically as unstable as the politics that I observed in Nepal, where the prime minister would change every 6 months. Here, Congress keeps flip-flopping, and so I encourage everybody on the call to learn about the Forward Party that's just trying to dismantle that duopoly through ranked choice voting, nonpartisan primaries, and make our democracy more like Canada's, where they have multiple parties that are able to form coalitions and pass legislation that actually does something that's beneficial to all Americans and that the majority of Americans support. So I will stop there and turn it over to questions for Vivekji, and if you have anything you'd like to ask me, I'm here as well. Hari Om.
Thank you so much, Prakash, for all you've shared in a comprehensive way through your words and through your actions and your family's actions. We began a little bit late, so we'll take minimal questions right now. If anyone has any questions, you can virtually put your hand up or here. And these questions will just be for Prakash. He's the scientist, the professional, and it'll be more valuable to hear from him. Any questions from anyone? You can also write them in the chat. In any direction. And if you don't want to ask Prakash, fine. You can ask me also. Okay. I'm going to start my countdown. 3, 2, and 1. Okay, Prakash. Okay. You got one question from Vignesh. Vignesh, ask away.
Hi, I'm really grateful for the presentation from both. Prakash ji, one quick question is, I was curious why the particulate matter pollution is so much greater in Asia, Middle East, in some parts of Africa. I was particularly concerned, is it because what we're doing in our society is forcing those countries to pollute more in order to produce for us?
Brilliant. Wow. Wow. Vignesh, that's very insightful. Yes. As many you may know, China overtook the US and the European Union as the largest emitter of greenhouse gases a few years ago. But the majority of the emissions coming from China are what we call export embodied emissions. The only reason that they're emitting that is because we've outsourced our manufacturing to them, us in Europe. And so if they weren't producing for us, they would not be emitting half of what they're emitting today. On the other hand, in North India, that's not the case. The Indo-Gangetic Plain, the source of PM 2.5 there, isn't so much due to power plants. It's largely driven, the majority of that pollution is from cooking with solid fuels. So there it's a case of not having access to clean energy like we have here, where we can cook with gas and electricity. They tend to cook with twigs, biomass, dung cakes, and so forth. And when you do that at scale, that may have been fine in the days of the Mahabharata when there was only 30 or to 50 million people in that region, but now it's 700 million, and everybody emitting very, very high amounts of pollution, probably eating a lot more than they did a couple of thousand years ago, eating more cooked food. That's basically driving the pollution way up. In addition, the brick kilns, the cement manufacturing, all of the other things are of course there, but yeah, it's the cooking with solid fuel that has to really change.
Thank you, Prakash. Out of respect for everyone's time, we're going to pause on our dialogue here. Again, we appreciate your teaching us through an audio-visual way. And the other questions that are coming up, tomorrow we'll try to create more time for a dialogue. We'll try. As we shift to our announcements, I'm starting with from the United Consciousness perspective. We have a conference in Germany that's happening in June. We have a conference that's happening in India in December, December 15th to the 17th. This is called the United Consciousness Conclave. And what's special about this is going to happen in Ujjain. That's actually where Sri Krishna learned. Even though he's teaching all, but apparently he learned too. And that's where he learned. I will be going from Canada, and I'm inviting everyone, particularly those in Canada and America, to come with me. We can travel there together, even though Prakash told us not to, but we're going there for a good reason. We're going there for a good reason. And then from the Chinmay Mission Cleveland Niagara perspective, I have been encouraging everyone through so many different forums to please fund the planting of trees. Right now, we're supporting Trees for the Future, which is an organization that is planting trees in the sub-Saharan Africa area, where this is needed. On Prakash's graph, you could have seen on that middle range of Africa, there's high air pollution. And that can be regulated to an extent through having more trees there. This morning, I was sharing that privilege is only privilege if you know it. And if you know it, then you share it. We have raised almost $13,000. My aspiration, my organizational expectation was by the completion of this workshop, which is tomorrow night, we would have reached $25,000, or at least by Arbor Day, which is on April 28th. So please think about everything that you've experienced in reference to the earth, particularly this workshop. And if you feel this dakshina, which means gratitude to our earth, to our community, then express this as dana, which means sharing your privilege, funding the planting of trees. This is not going to any particular person. It's going to all people, all generations. Your rad from yesterday was to pick one of the practices. I'm going to debrief on what I practiced. It was to speak based on satya, hita, and priya, to speak only if it's truthful, useful, and beautiful. Today, I had to interact with 5 different groups of people, and I was thinking about these filters and trying to practice this. I didn't feel social anxiety. I was okay with not speaking to this person if it didn't flow into these filters. So if you find you're a socially anxious person, practice speaking like this. And now your rad for today is pick another one. You learned a lot philosophically and professionally. Pick a practice. Practice this and feel this oneness. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Be safe, be sound, be serene. Once again, a joyous Earth Day, hoping we all feel this is every day. Be joy.